So now let's talk about a little bit about cultic life. Okay, what does cultic life look like? Remember, when we're talking cultic life, we're not using cult in a negative or derogatory way. This is just the religious life, exactly. And specifically the religious life that's not being practiced individually but communally. Now, when we talked about temples, right, this is where we brought up ziggurats, right, as temples. Make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay. The way that temples and ziggurats are a little different. Here's how. In a temple can be thought of as a microcosm of the universe. Okay? And what a microcosm is just in a sense, a small depiction of something larger. Right? So we could say, you know, the kind of racial diversity we have in this class is a microcosm of the greater diversity within the US. Right? It's a little off, but you could say something like that, right? Does that make sense? How I'm using the word microcosm? That's a way that you can talk about it. So temples can be seen as a microcosm of the cosmos, right? A small depiction of the cosmos. So for example, this makes sense when we read Psalm 78. If we think of temples as a microcosm of the cosmos. He rejected the tent of Joseph, he did not choose so on, but he chose Judah, Mount Zion, which he loves, and he built his sanctuary like the high heavens, like the earth, which he has founded forever. Right? He built his sanctuary like the heavens, like the earth. Right? He built his sanctuary like the cosmos. Right? The sanctuary being this microcosm. And what you do then inside the temple, right, by maintaining order and religious order inside the temple, inside this microcosm, you thereby establish that order in the larger cosmos. Okay? So what you do inside the temple to maintain order and religious order thereby maintains the order of the cosmos. Let me see here. Nope. I was hoping I had that. Okay. And that's a good, and I think actually I have that when we talk about rituals. That's kind of the function that rituals serve then, is maintaining that cosmic order within the microcosm so that there is order in the universe, in the cosmos. Yes.
You going to attendance today?
I am, and I should. So before we leave, we'll do that. Thank you. How did your mind go there in the midst of everything? You're like, you have not maintained order here.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So temple started with Israel?
No. You have temples in the ancient Near East prior to Israel. Yeah. For sure. Israel is kind of a part of that tradition. Yeah. Now, when we start talking, let me see, I'm going to skip to ziggurats. When we start thinking about ziggurats, then here's how ziggurats are different. First, ziggurats are not pyramids. I'm sure you read that in your text. Right? How do ziggurats and pyramids differ? You guys remember?
Materials.
Not the materials. Not necessarily.
It's a tomb.
It's a tomb. Good. So the pyramid's a tomb. On the inside of the pyramid, there are rooms. There are passageways, right? Ziggurats, there's no inside. Okay? So for example, I hope it just goes, no, just skip. All right, this is the ziggurat, or what's left of one. Okay, there's no inside here. This is very impressive. Right, you just have this staircase going up. If this ziggurat were not in the state it's in, what we would find at the top is pretty much, a house. And this house was a house for the god. Okay, this house was supposed to be, in a sense, a shadowy replication of the god's heavenly dwelling. Right? And so these ziggurats provided a way and a space for the immanent world, right, our physical world, and the transcendent world to kind of coalesce, right? This is where the gods would come in order to enter the physical world. Yeah?
That whole thing, that whole structure is a ziggurat, right?
Yes.
Not just a house that sits on.
Yeah, whole thing is a ziggurat, right? So yeah, at the top we have that house, it's also a shrine, right? This is where the priest would go to oftentimes to perform rituals, to offer sacrifices, right? They would oftentimes take up offerings here, right? If the god is going to come between, the divine realm and the earthly realm, you better make sure that you have prepared a house, like, right, a guest house in a sense, for that god. Okay? So we can think of it as kind of, in a sense, like a portal to the heavenly realm. Now, the Israelite view of these ziggurats is a little mixed. And I'm sure you guys saw that in your text. For example, Genesis 11. I was talking about the Tower of Babel. Throw it off of my Genesis 11. Right? Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Notice that the reason they're building this tower is not to ascend into heaven. Right? They're doing it to make a name for themselves. Right? And there's a whole host of things that can mean. They are not trying to get up into heaven. They're not thinking we're going to build this big tower so that we can get up into heaven. Right? That's never stated in the text. Right? And so it's likely that this is some indication of a ziggurat, because what happens to the ziggurat? It gets destroyed, right? And people get scattered. Right? So here we have a negative depiction of a ziggurat. On the other hand, we read this. This is Jacob's ladder, often referred to as. And Jacob dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to the heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Right? This idea of like some kind of heavenly portal. And the Lord stood beside him and said, "I am the Lord." Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, "Surely," and there's some text here, I didn't want to put the whole story. He woke and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Which is the same language that gets used for ziggurats, right? This, a house of God and the gate of heaven, right? So here we have this idea. Now, what Jacob does, though, at that location is he kind of sees this spiritual ziggurat in a sense, and he sets up an altar, right? So Jacob doesn't build a ziggurat, but he kind of acknowledges this same function. He just does it spiritually instead of physically. Does that make sense? And with that, with Jacob's dream, we also have this idea of sacred spaces, right? Certain locations that a deity or the heavenly realm is more palpable, is more present than others, right? Jacob says, right, surely, or how awesome is this place, right? Not, oh my gosh, I just had a dream. It's totally coincidental that I'm here and not at home, but I had this awesome dream, right? He said, this place is awesome, right? Because this is the place where these angels are ascending and descending, right? This is the place, this is the location where there's this kind of portal to the heavenly realm, right? And so that space is sacred, right? And that's why he sets up an altar there, because that space is considered sacred. Cool. So kind of continuing with cultic life, we need to talk a little bit about rituals, because rituals are very, very important. Let's see. As I said before, in the ancient Near East, rituals are caring for the gods. Right? The gods are hungry. You have the gods swarming around that offering because they need that to survive. Without those human offerings, the gods will perish. Whereas in Israel, we never really see this. We never really see this idea that God needs to be cared for. Right? We still have offerings, we still have sacrifices, But you never really get this idea that without that, God is going to perish or that God will be weak. If anything, God will get angry if you don't, but it's not that he needs to be cared for. And as we said before, it ensures cosmic order, right? You need to do these things in the microcosm of the temple, in the microcosm of this ritual, so that the greater order can be restored and sustained. For example, here's 1 Kings 8:35-37. When heaven is shut up and there's no rain because they have sinned against you, right? There's no rain because of the sin. And then they pray and turn from their sin, then hear in heaven and forgive the sin of your servants and grant rain on your land, right? If people have done something bad and you are punishing them in the cosmos because of it, then they will pray, they will do these rituals, and please send rain again. And then it goes on further. If there's famine, if there's plague, blight, mildew, locust, caterpillar, if the enemy besieges them, whatever plague, whatever sickness there is, right? It continues talking about let us do these rituals so that you can restore cosmic order. Right? So even in Israel, and this would go for both of them, this ensuring cosmic order is both seen in the ancient Near East and in ancient Israel.